As the New Testament explains repeatedly, Christ's once-for-all-time perfect sacrifice has superseded every earlier form of sacrifice. That's why the New Testament author of Hebrews so strongly condemned Christians that wanted to return to Old Testament sacrifices. Listen to what he wrote in Hebrews chapter 8, verse 13. By calling this covenant new, he has made the first one obsolete, and what is obsolete and aging will soon disappear. Now, we have to be careful, because many well-meaning Christians take this to mean that followers of Christ should simply discard the Old Testament and pay no attention to its teaching. But nothing could be further from the truth. Its author wasn't telling Christians that the Old Testament was irrelevant. Rather, he was saying that we live in a different epoch. We don't ignore the old ways, but we should never try to serve God as if we still lived in the old days. Imagine that you live in the period of David's dynastic covenant. You know that God has ordained the kings of Israel to lead his people into war against evil. The kings receive direction from God and in turn direct the ways that you participate in war. But now imagine that you personally don't like the Davidic king and want to return to the covenant epic of Moses' national law. You might prefer to follow a local judge like Gideon, or an Ephraimite like Joshua, or a Levite like Moses himself, just like your ancestors did. But if you followed one of these instead of the house of David, that would be sin. You would be violating God's command for your epoch. In every age, we need to follow the military leadership that God has established for that age. As people living under the new covenant, we follow Jesus, the great son of David. He is our God-ordained king, and God has given him the exclusive right to lead his people into war against the forces of evil. But how do we do that? What is our current strategy for war?
So when Paul says the weapons of our war are the Word of God and prayer and faith and so on, as he does in Ephesians chapter 6, he's saying this is no longer geopolitical national warfare, that Christians must not be nationalistic in how they perceive war. There's the sword and there's the cross, and the tendency of us as human beings is to put down the cross and take up the sword. But Jesus said, no one can be my disciple unless he take up his cross and follow me.
This is a very different strategy from those of earlier epochs, when leaders like Moses and David led God's people into physical flesh and blood battles. There were still spiritual battles too, but these leaders didn't head up God's spiritual armies. By contrast, Jesus doesn't lead the church into physical battles, but he does lead us in spiritual warfare, and we violate God's will if we ignore this strategic shift.